Let's talk about advanced meditation. Well, not the most advanced, but that sphere off the basic practice and into states of awareness where weird things happen. In this video, we will talk about Dhyana. Technically, Dhyana is a state where you are completely focused without any interruption from your thoughts or being bothered by your body sensations. You're still conscious, you're present, but the internal noise is all gone and you can rest comfortably into a state of pure awareness. The word dhyana comes from Sanskrit. In Hindi, they call this state dhyan, so perhaps you heard of it like that. If you are meditating to lower your stress, you don't need to concern yourself with dhyana. But if you are on a spiritual path or a magical path of some sort, then being able to reach this state is a high priority. Really, in practical terms, you should direct your practice so that you reach dhyana as efficiently and consistently as possible. Once you're in dhyana, the mind starts processing things differently and faster. So a lot of accumulated issues get processed at a much faster rate than before without you even doing much. All the benefits of meditation intensify, really. There is a marked difference on the effect of every minute in dhyana in comparison to basic meditation. They are not in the same league. It's in dhyana that most of the meditation experiences happen. When people talk of seeing things, hearing things, of getting amazing insights, of feeling sensations and many other types of experiences that can be had in meditation, it is invariably through the dhyana state that these things happen. Dhyana is also the foundation for contemplative practices. So if you want to do almost all of the Advaita Vedanta contemplations, where one considers an idea such as Tatvamasi, which means I am Brahman, or you want to contemplate the paradoxical riddles from the Zen tradition called koans, or any other contemplative practice, really the way to do this is from a dhyana state. Granted, you can do contemplation from any state, but there is a difference between pondering a question, a statement, or riddle, and contemplating it. When you contemplate, you do not reason about it. You watch it. You hold it in the same space from where intuition appears, and you wait until intuition itself interacts with it. Now, this is more advanced, and we're not going to discuss how to do contemplation in this video. We are going to focus on the state of awareness that is necessary to even consider this type of practice. Dhyana is also the ideal state from which many of the Western magical practice should be done, certainly from where they would be more effective. I'm talking of channeling, astral travel, scrying, charging sigils, invoking, evoking, and more. Today we will discuss what the dhyana state is with as much precision as possible and how you might reach it, so stay to the end. To discuss dhyana in detail, I'm going to need to talk a bit about the meaning of words, so this will get pretty deep into the woods. Before we go there though, I think I can give you a somewhat superficial definition that can give you a general idea and allow us to progress without going too deep right away. Dhyana is, as I said before, a state of awareness. This is the first thing you need to consider. Dhyana is not something that you do. It's a state in which you are. So you are awake right now. You don't do awake. You are awake. Awake is a state characterized by a certain type of cognitive abilities and a way of feeling. Then there is sleep, which is a different state where you have entirely different cognitive abilities and feelings. In fact, when you're asleep, you're quite unconscious of what's going on. Now, consider how you go from awake to asleep. You do not sleep as an action. You cannot make yourself sleep. What you do is you create the conditions under which you enter that state spontaneously. You must be sufficiently tired, and then you lay on the bed, calm yourself down, try to clear your thoughts, and stay there long enough, and then sleep happens to you. Well, dhyana is similar. If the conditions are right, you will enter this state. So let's start by making clear that dhyana is not a form of meditation. It is a state of consciousness. As with other states of consciousness, it happens to you naturally when the conditions are appropriate. In rough terms, we can describe the dhyana state as being similar to putting the body to sleep while your mind is awake. It's not quite like that, but it has strong similarities to this description. Same as in sleep, your body no longer bothers you or gives you any pleasure. You still feel it, but you don't really care. There is a form of distancing. One may even say detachment from the body. Different from sleep, though, you are completely conscious. However, your mental state in dhyana is not the same as being awake. You are in fact quite focused. If I were to compare the state of mind of dhyana, I'd say that it resembles the state of hypnosis. When you are extremely focused on something, in a state of flow, there is some similarity there. Also in sex, when you are entirely in the experience, there is something that is of the same nature here. The point is focus. In Dhyana, your mind is focused. Now, you can be focused on something specific, or you can be still just chilling, but if you felt that state, you will see that even chilling in Dhyana has a quality of being focused. Yet the focus in Dhyana is rather soft, is not stressed. So it is a light but all-encompassing focused state. In Dhyana, you have no thoughts unless they are directed by the activity, if you are doing any activity. You sometimes may have a thought here and there, but they never carry you away. Okay, I hope this makes sense because this is as far as we'll go for now. I hope you have some superficial idea of what I'm talking about, and hopefully some of you even recognize what I'm saying. Now, the word dhyana comes from the Sanskrit root di, meaning to think or to contemplate. And originally, dhyana referred to focused reflection or still attention. The earliest Vedic texts don't really present a formal system of meditation, but later texts like the Upanishads begin to move away from rituals toward inner experience. It's in the Upanishads that we start to see the seeds of internalization, of meditation, but not yet called dhyana in the same way it is used later. The term dhyana, as we use it here, was first defined in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which were composed somewhere between the 2nd century BCE and the 5th century CE, so more recent than most of the Upanishads. You may have heard of these sutras because this is where yoga itself, the physical practice, was first defined as an activity aimed at enlightenment. In the Yoga Sutras, the word yoga doesn't mean the physical poses we know as yoga in the West. In the sutras, those poses are called asanas. Yoga refers to the entire set of practices one can do if one is to follow what's known as the Raja path to enlightenment. Patanjali's idea was to provide a quite specific path, a very precise and quite guaranteed path to enlightenment, which required only one thing from the practitioner: willpower. This is why Patanjali's methods are identified with the Raja path, that is, the path of willpower. This is because although Patanjali's methods may be systematic and guaranteed, they're not easy. Still, for many, this is the best option. Other paths tend to be very loose and unsystematic, so the Raja path is very attractive to a huge amount of practitioners. The practitioner on the Raja path who follows Patanjali's system is supposed to engage in the 8 limbs of yoga. Each limb contains a specific set of practices one must engage in consistently. Well, the 7th limb is dhyana, which translates roughly to meditation. But dhyana is not meditation as an action, it is a meditative state. What we know as meditation is actually Dharana and perhaps Pratyahara and Pranayama. Let me explain quickly. The first limb of yoga is Yama, which is a set of ethical parameters you must satisfy. The second limb is Niyama, which is a set of personal practices such as hygiene, devotion, and study of the scriptures. The third limb of the path of yoga is Asana. That's the yoga we know in the West. So you must do the poses to prepare the body. Then the fourth limb is Pranayama. These are the breathing practices, and they are meant to prepare your energy, what they call the subtle body. Then the fifth limb is Pratyahara. Those are techniques to control your sensory reactivity, so you are not bothered by your body. The sixth limb is Dharana, which are mental focusing techniques. Now, Pratyahara and Dharana are what we usually think of as meditation in the classical sense. So when someone says to count your breaths, that's a Dharana. As you see, the 6 first limbs are all about preparing the conditions so you can enter a new state of awareness consistently. If you calm your mind by aligning your ethics and personal practices, you calm your body with asana, you regulate your energy with pranayama, you control your senses with pratyahara, and you focus your mind with dharana, you can then enter the 7th limb, which is dhyana. If you are curious, the 8th limb is another state of consciousness called samadhi. So this is a state you reach from within the dhyana state. The samadhi state is described as transitory enlightenment. It's a state where you have already realized certain degrees of liberation. So when people describe having ego death or ego dissolution from a psychedelic, for example, that's a form of samadhi. If you're interested in the 8 limbs of yoga and you want me to go over them in detail, let me know in the comments. So, control of body, energy, and senses is a prerequisite of dhyana. Even more, the ability to focus, as is usually required in meditation, is also a prerequisite of dhyana. The 6 first limbs of yoga are things you do. Dhyana is not a thing you do, it's a state you reach. The doing here is in the sense that you must enter this state quite often and for a while. The idea in the Patanjali Sutras is that you should be doing enough asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and dharana to enter the dhyana state and explore there. Okay, so around the same time, early Buddhism adopted the word dhyana into Pali as jhana. Now, the term jhana in Theravada Buddhism refers to the 8 increasingly elevated states of consciousness. The first 4 states correspond to degrees of dhyana, as we are discussing here. So the first 4 jhanas are known as the form jhanas. They call them the rupa jhanas. So the first jhana would be the first stage of dhyana you would experience, which they describe as applied and sustained thought. So you are still doing an activity and you may feel joy, bliss, and one-pointedness of the mind. In the second jhana, you lose the applied thought, so you are no longer doing an activity per se, but you retain the state of mind of joy, bliss, and one-pointedness. In the third jhana, you lose the joy and become equanimous. This is a more neutral state where you still feel bliss and one-pointedness. Then in the fourth jhana, you lose the bliss and become only completely equanimous. So you are emotionally neutral and your mind retains the one-pointed state. Now, these states are called the form jhanas because you are still perceiving the physical world. Your consciousness in these states is altered, but it is firmly in this earth. It is grounded in reality as we commonly know it. The next 4 jhanas are the formless jhanas. They call them the arupa jhanas. And here you start to perceive the ineffable. Infinite space, infinite consciousness, then nothingness, and then finally neither perception nor non-perception. Now, the 4 formless jhanas are not stages of dhyana. They are more stages of samadhi. So these are degrees of enlightenment. So the equivalent here would be the 8th limb of yoga, not the 7th, which is what we're discussing today. Now, the 4 form jhanas are not a description of progressive states you go through. You could enter the 3rd jhana state without going through the first 2. They're actually prescriptive. According to Theravada Buddhism, you should aim to progress toward less emotional activation and more neutrality. Note that this is not necessarily what other traditions would prescribe, certainly not Tantra, for example. Every tradition prizes dhyana, but not every tradition wants you to work towards neutrality. Now, note that the term dhyana comes from a fundamentally dualistic tradition, specifically from Sankhya Yoga. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are composed from within a dual worldview. The belief is that you are the witness, the observer. They call that Purusha. So in that sense, we are in agreement with the neti-neti reflection I covered in my previous video, which I'm linking in the screen. However, in Sankhya Yoga, your body, mind, and senses, the world, they are all real and separate from you. They are the manifest part of Prakriti. Prakriti is the root of all phenomena, the causal ground of the physical, psychological, and subtle universe. Your job is to realize that you are not part of Prakriti, you are not manifest in the physical world. You are the pure witness consciousness, Purusha. Every person is a different Purusha, a different observer, but we are separate from the physical world, including our own bodies. That said, note that dhyana is a state of consciousness. The point is to use this state for many things. You can use dhyana as a step to realize emptiness, as in Theravada Buddhism and Zen, or you can use it as a step to realize the non-duality of all things, as in Advaita Vedanta and Dzogchen, and you can use it as a state in which you contact entities or interact with the fundamental elements of creation, as in Tantra and Western magic. All right, let's dive into the dhyana state itself. Fundamentally, the dhyana state corresponds fairly closely to the end of the neti-neti reflection. In dhyana, you are in the state of the observer of your own experience. Now, here's where things start to get tricky, because when describing dhyana, words start to fail us. Any terms I use are hopelessly ambiguous, vague, and even misleading. You know why this is? Because language is built to describe common experiences. A word I use has meaning only if you and I both mean the same thing by it. If I say, I saw the Eiffel Tower, you know exactly what I mean. Maybe you've seen it in person or in a photo or on TV, but you've seen it. You and I understand exactly the same things by those 2 words. Now, let's say I told you I saw a red elephant. I'm fairly confident you've never seen a red elephant before, but even then, you'd still understand what I meant. You've seen elephants, you know the color red, your brain can combine the 2. Still, the meaning of the Eiffel Tower was precise, but the meaning of the red elephant is somewhat less precise. You probably can't picture exactly what I imagined. And that's important because it shows how language is already beginning to break down. The red elephant in your mind probably looks different from the one in mine, but even so, there's still a high level of shared understanding. But where we're going now, that shared ground starts to disappear. Because now I need to describe something that some people have experienced, but many haven't. And without that shared reference, communication gets harder. Let's say it's the 1800s and I'm a poor, uneducated person living in South America. You come to me and say, I saw a red elephant in my travels. I know the color red, but I've never seen an elephant. Not in real life, not in pictures, not in stories. So I have no idea what you're talking about. You're naming something that's completely outside my experience. I am missing a fundamental piece of information. What is an elephant? So I can't even begin to form a picture of what you mean. Now, if you show me a photograph, an 1800 style photo, I'd probably get some idea. It would not be perfect, but I think you would have been able to convey enough of the meaning. It's kind of like seeing the Eiffel Tower in pictures. It's not the same as the real thing, but at least we understand what we're talking about. What if you drew an elephant instead of showing me a photo? Now, depending on your drawing skills, I'd be far from fully grasping what you meant. Now, if you did not draw it at all, you just told me about it, I would have a very poor idea of what you meant. Just think about it. I saw a red elephant. An elephant is a huge animal with thick, wrinkly skin and a very rounded appearance. It has huge ears that dangle to the sides and a hose-like thing protruding from the nose, which we call a trunk. What? You see what I'm saying, right? Describing a state of consciousness to someone who has never been on it is like describing an elephant to someone who has never seen one. It's actually worse because at least the elephant is a physical thing. Now, suppose we're talking about something that can't be drawn or pictured at all. Let's say I'm talking about fear. You understand what I mean because you felt fear. It's a common human experience, so we can talk about it with a fair amount of precision. But what if I were to talk about fear for my life? A fear so intense that the body goes into a state of shock. Unfortunately, some people will know exactly what that's like, but others might just sort of understand. If you never felt the fear, you sort of get it because you have been afraid before, but you have no idea what this is really like. It is the same with love. I can talk about love and almost everyone will get the general idea. They've seen it even if they haven't felt it. But only those who've actually experienced certain kinds of love can really understand. Falling madly in love or the love for a child, to understand this with precision, one needs to have lived it. The real meaning of the expression fear for your life or the expression being madly in love cannot truly be conveyed. They can only be recognized. Once you have been madly in love, you understand exactly what that is. Anyone who hasn't been madly in love can at best have a rough idea. But with states of consciousness, the terrain is even more precarious than that. I'm going to describe things that most people haven't experienced in any degree. So from this point forward, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the best you can do is give me the benefit of the doubt that these things I'm describing have been experienced by other humans. You don't have to believe me. What's more important than belief is that you try to understand me as well as you can, and that you try to hold on to what I'm saying, keeping as much as possible in your memory. Because one day, you may find yourself wandering through the inner landscape of your mind, exploring the depths of your being, and you might catch a glimpse of something that feels like the kinds of things I'm describing here. And if that moment comes, I hope you'll be curious instead of freaked out. Okay, in the same way that everyone feels different when they fall asleep, nothing of what I describe needs to happen to you. However, there are some general patterns. The first sign of Dhyana, in my experience, and from what I know for a lot of people, is an energy, sort of like a current. This can be on your entire body, but it can just be in a part of your body. It is very common to feel a current in the arms or legs. Then some parts of the body, or all of the body, can feel extremely heavy or extremely hard. Actually, when I think about it, it's as if they are extremely still. So there is a fundamental immobility that registers as heaviness, but instead the body part is light. So it's somewhat paradoxical. It is still as a heavy object while being light enough to float. Now, at this point, the sensation of what is your hand, for example, decouples from what you know to be your actual hand. So the typical sensation is that you have huge hands or huge arms, for example. In fact, if you want to play with astral travel and these kinds of things, that's basically the beginning of it, because that's the decoupling of what you conceive to be your border from the actual physical borders of you. Although you do not typically notice, you have some conception of what your hand is. That's proprioception. In this state, your hand feels like something else. The weight, the temperature, and the size, all of these can be completely different from the idea you have about that part of your body. The first time this happens, you will probably interrupt the process. Perhaps you'll do this many times. This is because a part of you may become too excited or you may freak out. You have to relax into it and try as much as you can to not judge the state. It is not good, nor strange, nor scary. It just is. It's okay to be curious. I had success getting through this even though I was super curious about it and I paid a lot of attention to the sensations. It's my impression that curiosity is a safe attitude to bring to these experiences. Excitement, judgment, fear, all of these will often drop you out of dhyana, but curiosity seems to be fine in my experience. Another thing to tell you is that also in my experience, having an interruption in the descent into dhyana, but then returning to the practice often leads to a faster entering into the state. What I mean is this: it is often common for me to be chilling with the hand sensations I just described, and then I feel a jolt, a sudden movement, a jerk, or even dizziness. This drives me completely out of the state. Well, if I think nothing of it and return, it's as if I just caught a fast train. I go much faster. Now, that jolt I'm talking about is a recognized threshold event. This is because the vestibular system wants to protect you. The vestibular system is the system in your body that keeps track of your balance and spatial orientation. As you stop sensing your surroundings, your brain tries to reorient you. However, if you return to the calm focus you had before, you're telling your system, look, I got your warning, but I'm not afraid. I'm safe here. I'm choosing to do this. And once your body registers this, it allows you to enter the dhyana state much faster. There are references to this type of jolt in several traditions, actually. For example, in the Burmese Theravada tradition, it's explicitly recognized in the writings of Pa U Sayadaw and Sayadaw U Pandita. In mystical Christianity, these spasms were described by Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, and Hildegard of Bingen, and John of the Cross. Now, when you are in dhyana, the sounds you hear become distant. If your eyes are open, the image also becomes distant. It is not that it becomes actually distant. It's not as if your reality becomes distorted, as in a psychedelic trip. No, it's that these things simply do not enter your world. They only ever penetrate your important circuitry if they become extreme. You know what I mean? You simply do not care so much that you stop hearing it. Technically, I don't think you stop hearing. It's as if you dissociate from the external inputs. They are there, and if they become extreme, you will come out of this state, same as you would wake up if you heard a huge noise. So part of your brain is still tracking the sound, but your conscious mind is unconcerned. The same tends to happen to your breath, and in fact, any body sensation. They are there, you just fundamentally do not care. You are detached of your physical state. The thoughts are interesting in dhyana. The standard description is that you have no thoughts. However, if you are in dhyana while pondering something, or honestly while speaking to something, then the focus is complete. You have thoughts, but all thoughts are at the service of the activity. In practice, you may actually have a stray thought here and there in dhyana. It's just that you don't heed them, you know? It's much easier in dhyana to do the classic recommendation of observing your thoughts without engaging on them. To be precise, you do not have many thoughts, but if one occurs, you can separate yourself from it fairly easily. Another phenomenon in dhyana that you may encounter is a loud hum. It's as if a huge static was present. You don't always hear this. It is much easier to hear this if you have earplugs or noise-canceling headphones. That static is actually extremely rich in sounds, and it shifts its nature depending on where your consciousness is focused. That swarm is actually the unstruck sound, the anāhata sound. In my experience, it sounds like a swarm of 1,000,000 bees, but it is not uniform. There is a lot inside of it. Some people say that it sounds like 1,000,000 bells or 1,000,000 crickets, and I can see how that makes sense as well. The unstruck sound is well documented in Nada Yoga, Tantric Shaivism, in the Kundalini literature, and even in Dzogchen. The unstruck sound is identified as the vibratory essence of consciousness. It is the first movement within consciousness, not a sound in the physical sense, but a subtle, pre-manifest vibration. I don't know if this is what it is, but what I do know is that when NASA scientists measured the electromagnetic waves of planets and converted them into sound waves, the sound of the planet Earth is eerily similar to what I'm talking about. Now, the unstruck sound is a deep topic and not the focus of today. Let me know if you're interested in that. Back to Dhyana, another common phenomenon is a complete time distortion. Not only do you not necessarily feel the time passing, you can spend hours in what feels like minutes and minutes that feels like hours, but you do not have boredom related to time. In fact, if there is one thing that describes Dhyana better than everything else, it's the following two words: not boring. It's really not boring. Whether you are or not doing anything at all, or you are engaging in some focusing practice or some more esoteric practice, in Dhyana you have no concerns with the external world. And your essence is unconcerned and interested, so the Dhyana state feels inherently interested. And anything you do in it feels interesting. So how do you actually reach the Dhyana state so you can verify what it is like for yourself? According to Patanjali, you get there by engaging consistently in the first 6 limbs of yoga. Now, it may seem that the first 4 limbs can be skipped. Technically you can, but should you? The first limb, Yama, is ethics. If your conscience is heavy, it will be difficult to clear your thoughts. The second limb, Niyama, is about personal practices like cleanliness, discipline, and devotion to God. I think that you need a good dose of at least some of this to give you the willpower and the conviction that are needed for this. Now, the third limb is about asana. You do not need to practice yoga specifically, but keeping your body immobile is actually very hard. Things start hurting very quickly. You need flexibility and strength to keep the positions, so it makes sense to engage in asana practice. That said, I will tell you that I have meditated a huge amount just laying down due to some physical issues that at many points prevented me from sitting to meditate. And you know what? I could enter Dhyana just as well. The secret, if you are going to meditate laying down, is to meditate as soon as you wake up. This way, you won't fall asleep. I'll also say that it is actually harder to enter Dhyana from a laying down position, so you should be aware of that. And honestly, if we are talking about meditating for hours, laying down also hurts, so it's not as if you are spared pain because you're lying down. Long term, if you can, it is a good idea to meditate upright. There are many special chairs and pillows to help you overcome physical difficulties. Let me know if you want me to make a video on that. Okay, the fourth limb is pranayama. Pranayama consists of many breathing exercises. The objective of pranayama is to control your energy and relation between your physical body and your subtle body. The point is that you can control your energy through pranayama for any activity. The energy that is optimal for meditation is quite specific. You want a perfect balance between active and resting. Unfortunately, this is a really huge topic, so I will have to cut this short. If you want to dabble into that right away, look up the pranayama technique called Nadi Shodhana. This is not necessarily the best technique for you or the best technique for your specific objective, but it is a very specific balancing technique which is easy to learn and does not require you to feel any energy at all. You just do it a few minutes and trust the process. I will also say that although I have practiced a lot of pranayama, I not always do pranayama before meditating, though I almost always do yoga before meditating. The point is that none of the things I am describing here are necessary to enter Dhyana, but you have to create the conditions in some way, and the 6 limbs are the most direct way to do this. Okay, let's get to the meat here. The 5th limb is Pratyahara. These are techniques that help with the elimination of the senses. What you're aiming for is to become completely unbothered by sensory perception. The classic technique is to do body scans. You've done them, right? You go down your body, putting your attention on each part without stopping. I happen to hate body scans. I find them very distracting because I had to deal with quite a bit of pain. For me, what works best is some much more radical stuff I'll tell you about in a minute. Some Pratyahara techniques I enjoy a lot have to do with training fine sensory perception. Focusing intently on sensations teaches you to ignore other sensations. So, following all the sounds in the environment, orienting, that's looking around your environment, all around you and also above and below, not stopping but putting attention as you scan. My favorite Pratyahara methods are trataka and kaya sthairyam. These are intense techniques. They don't eliminate the senses by dulling them, but through sensory overload. It's a very different strategy. As with the other limbs, I can only speak very superficially. Teaching you how to enter Dhyana is basically teaching advanced meditation. It is not something one can do in a single video. If you're curious about Pratyahara techniques, let me know in the comments and I'll make a separate video on them. However, there is a shortcut, something you can try even without any formal meditation training to give you the benefits of Pratyahara without any of the training. Sensory deprivation tanks. They're also called floatation therapy tanks. When you go to one of these places, you're submerged in a tank filled with salt water that's heated to exactly your body temperature. The air is the same temperature too, so you float in an environment where the water and air match the surface of your skin perfectly. Your ears are underwater, so you hear nothing. You're in complete darkness, so you see nothing. The tanks are odorless, so you smell nothing. And let's say you haven't eaten recently, then there is no taste either. In other words, these tanks are incredibly effective at eliminating your senses. Okay, now let's talk about the sixth limb, Dharana. We eliminated the body with Pratyahara, now we eliminate the mind. Dharanas are focusing techniques that allow you to quiet your thoughts and emotions enough that you're not thinking about anything, not feeling anything, and your mind becomes completely still. The classic dharana is to focus on the breath and focus on it until the mind finally gives up and stops interrupting you. And then you just pure focus until even the object of your focus disappears from your perception, which happens in dhyana. There are many dharana options. The breath is just one, and in my opinion, it's not the best one, especially not for beginners and especially not for neurodivergent beginners. There are so many other options. Mantras, visualizations, breathing techniques, even inquisitive practices like the Who Am I reflection with Neti Neti from my previous video. This is why I love trataka and sthairyam, because they actually work as both pratyahara and dharana. They're so intense that your thoughts run away first, completely overwhelmed by the stimulation. And then eventually your senses go quiet too. These techniques invert the usual order. First your mind becomes still and then your senses go away. In my opinion, trataka and sthairyam are two of the most effective techniques for people with ADHD or trauma. They're pretty crazy and they tend to physically hurt at first, but in my own experience, they're fully sufficient to reach dhyana. Okay, let's stop here for this video because this is already way too long. Send me a note in the comments if there is anything here you want me to cover in depth. We are just starting out, so any comment you leave me, liking, subscribing, all of this really helps us continue providing this type of material. Check out my husband's video linked on the screen. He talks about the difficulty of conveying spiritual experiences to others with any precision. I wish you all the best in this path, and I hope to see you soon in my next video.